Welcome in, everybody. The Nick Saban Show, live from Baumhauer's Victory Grill here in Tuscaloosa. Eli Gold, joined by our special media guest, Tom Rinaldi. Tom, great to have you on the show. The coach is just a couple minutes behind schedule. He'll be joining us here in just a minute or so, but great to have you with us. What you been up to?
It's obviously been such a different kind of season, Eli, and in particular for game day. We feed off the energy of the crowds, and we're so grateful that we've had folks who wanted to come out and hold the signs up and be the Greek chorus to everything we've done here for the past couple of decades. And it's been a work in progress for us. And right down to, for example, this week, going to Coastal Carolina, Eli, expecting them to be facing Liberty.
Yeah.
They then have an exposure and an outbreak, and suddenly, wait a second, now it's going to be BYU flying across the country. Utah challenged in its own way as a state with COVID. They're coming across the Coastal. Adaptability, right, is so important right now for all of us, and certainly any of us that work in college football, for sure.
Exactly right. Tom Rinaldi is with us. We'll be getting to your calls and comments when the coach joins us. People ask me, not that I am comparing myself to you because I am not, but they say, what have been your most memorable interviews? And a couple of names come to mind. I had a chance to sit down. There have been many, but I've sat down with John Wooden. I sat down with the late, great Eddie Robinson, the coach at Grambling. Who's at the top of your interview hit list when people say what were the events and the interviews you most cherished doing?
Well, listen, I may have to be accused fully of pandering right here, but certainly Coach Saban has been high among them, and he's had no problem at times letting me know where he thought I've colored outside the lines in a couple of the questions that I've asked, and I'm not saying that it wasn't deserved at the time. So I know he's getting set here to join us, Eli, but he'd be high on the list, and believe me, I say that truthfully.
And Tom Rinaldi, coach, is high. As I said earlier, you weren't quite with us yet. I said anybody who wants to be an interviewer, whether it's in sports or the secular world, if they grow up and say, I want to be like Tom Rinaldi, they've picked themselves a good man to model themselves after.
I don't think there's any question about that. I think one of the things that I really enjoy about Tom is he always has some very inspirational type questions that make you really think and dig deep in terms, and they're interesting, things that he forces you to discuss and talk about. Mm-hmm. And most guys, they're so superficial with, some of the things that they ask you and so obvious. And it's almost like you say, you're thinking to yourself, well, this is not a very good question, but I've never really ever felt that way with Tom. He's one of the best in the business, no doubt. He's got a great demeanor about him. He's very positive. I certainly appreciate the relationship that we've been able to develop through the years and really respect him for what he does. But also, what ESPN and the people in his business really do for college football and college football players. Because the what you bring to the people and the interest that you create really goes a long way in making college football what it is today.
Definitely. Coach, how you doing? Tell me how you feeling and so on. Everything good?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great.
You look great.
I don't know if I told this story publicly, but I've had one of those IV deals Wednesday morning of last week, a week ago, and the plasma treatment, whatever it's called. And it really worked wonders. I mean, I woke up the next day and I really only had slight symptoms of a head cold, maybe a little cough. So I felt like I had a cold, but that's about it. I didn't feel bad. I didn't have fever. But whatever was in this plasma deal, I mean, it knocked it all out in one day. So from Thursday on, I felt, great and 100%. And I would certainly recommend that treatment to anybody who could get it, that's for sure.
I hear you. Tom Rinaldi, why don't you jump on in and let's throw a few questions in the coach's direction.
I'm certainly glad, Nick, that you're feeling well, and I agree with Eli. You look good. Chris Lowe on ESPN.com wrote a fantastic piece where he spoke to you, which is one side of things, but then he went to the real seat of power and he spoke to Terry. And I'd like you to describe what the scene was like from 90 minutes before kick through the game inside the walls of that house last Saturday.
Well, we stayed separate. Terry watched the game downstairs, probably sat in my chair. And I had sort of an upstairs here is where I have an office that I've been working on up for the last week, with the Zooms, the videos, watching practice, being in the meetings with the players and all that. So all that technology was up here. So I had two TVs that I watched. I actually watched the film of the game, the tape of the game that they actually shoot for coaches' benefit. And then I had the TV on. Well, the TV's got a little 2 or 3 second delay, between what's really happening. So I could actually watch the play and then see it on TV and see the replay so I could see it a second time. So, and it was interesting. And I would make notes, on things, but really couldn't communicate with anybody. But I did a couple times when I know we made big time mistakes and big time errors, or the quarterback didn't throw the ball to the right guy, or, we didn't cover him right on defense or whatever. I cussed the TV a few times, I must admit, but nobody else could hear. But it was kind of funny because every time we'd make a big play, I'm pretty unemotional about that. And I would hear this big hooting and hollering downstairs from Miss Terry. And then every time something would go bad, you'd hear this TV getting cussed out coming from upstairs, and there'd be silence downstairs. So it was kind of the tale of two cities.
Nick, you have spoken about sort of the desire to have everybody continue to do their jobs, have the preparation take the shape that it normally would. But help people understand during a practice, for example, when you're on the phone with Charlie, I believe, what that chain of communication has been like. And perhaps, Nick, one thing you might have learned that you would not have known otherwise, were you there?
Yeah, I actually, you see a lot more when you're watching it on video than when you're standing on the field with the players, because you're at ground level, you're basically up close. I always watch from behind the offense, so you're not in the way, of what's happening as the offense, whether it's the defense out there or the offense out there. So you really only you kind of got to watch one side or the other. But when, you're watching on video, you see the big picture and you can see just about what everybody does. So it's almost like sitting in the press box watching the game as opposed to being on the sidelines. I could make a lot more corrections and have a lot more input, based on what I was doing here at home. Now, of course, not having the presence there, you don't get the same feeling for the energy in practice or the intensity of it. But the players have been pretty good about it. I was not ever disappointed. The first day when I told them that I wasn't going to be there, I thought we had a subpar practice. That was last Wednesday before the Auburn game. But since that time, they kind of improvised and adapted, and they've gone along and done things really well. And I've been in every meeting, and I speak to them at every occasion that I usually do after every practice. They come up to a TV monitor and I speak to them, and I start the team meetings with them. And so it's not like being there, but the technology is really pretty amazing.
I was really go ahead, Tom.
I'm sorry, Eli.
No,
go ahead.
please.
Okay, one quick follow, Nick, that I just wanted to ask. A couple of people on staff had mentioned in a way, and you echoed this, Nick, and I think the time we've spent together, you're a very grateful and appreciative person. But what has this, in some sense, allowed you to appreciate about what you do, being forced to at least be arm's length away from it?
Well, I think it really makes you appreciate not just what you do, all right, but you appreciate how much other people, sort of contribute, because really the job that the coaches did, everybody kind of picked up the slack. So nothing really ever skipped the beat. Now, you're trying to create that culture in your organization. And if you have that kind of culture and you have that kind of leadership, then, your absence is not maybe as significant as if you didn't have, that culture with the work ethic and the discipline and so forth that you try to build over time, in all your players and all the people in the organization. But I think one of the things that we did early on with this whole season coming up was, we talked to the players about how many disruptions and how unusual this season would be. All right, so it's almost like, so what's next with our players? Because no matter what coach is out, what player's out, me being out, whatever it's been like, okay, this is kind of expected. All right, so we have to be able to carry on. Things are not going to be normal, and we have to get used to it not being normal, and we got to be able to carry on. And the other thing that I talked a lot about to the players is, what's your identity? What's your DNA, as a competitor and as a person? And then how do all these things, which are really external things that we really can't control, why should that impact any of those things? And I think they kind of get that. They kind of understand that, okay, there's a road ahead of us. So how are we going to manage the road? It's going to be managed by our choices and decisions, and we can't let disruptions that occur that we don't have any control over sort of affect how we choose to, go down this road ahead of us and the challenges that we have. So psychologically, at least, I think they've tried to approach it the right way. And because it is something that, people in general, when things don't go the same routine of how they expect them to go, they get affected by those things. So that's one thing that our team has done a really pretty good job of, I think, which was demonstrated in the last game. It was a lot harder on me than it was anybody else. The coaches did a great job. The players did a great job. But I think it was a true picture of the culture of everybody in the organization being able to, sort of transcend the same quality without my influence at all.
Play action fake. Then he pumps, throws long. Devonta wide open. He is so wide open. It's unbelievable. Touchdown, Alabama. 66 yards. Folks, seriously, he was so wide open, he could have stopped and read War and Peace, and they still wouldn't have been able to catch up with him. Touchdown, Alabama. I'll tell you, Coach, the combination of Mac and Devonta, the protection that allowed that play to develop, when it works like that, man, it's a thing of beauty.
Well, it sure is. It was a double pattern on the safety, one of those RPO type plays that you run the RPO so many times and the safety's got to come out of the top to cover the guy. And then all of a sudden you do a double move and the safety bites and the guy gets behind him. They actually ran a similar play against us before the half and 2 minutes before the half and had a guy wide open behind us and he just didn't catch the ball. So we were pretty fortunate about that one. But Smitty's really good at that. It is frustrating when you play defensive back and you're a safety and you've got to cover a wide receiver in the slot pretty consistently on most RPOs, which are relatively short passes, slants, in routes, that type of thing. And then you're doing it from top down and you can't stop them. And all you do is tackle the guy. And now you're going to try to get a little closer to it. And he runs a double pattern and you've got a great receiver on the safety. And it's kind of a mismatch to start with. But in that circumstance, it's really tough.
It really is. Let's go to the phones, fellas. We've got our first caller of the night, as per usual, sponsored by Alabama 811. Always contact 811 before you dig. To know what's below, call 811 or visit al811.com. Pee Wee is in Grand Bay, Alabama. Pee Wee, you're on with Coach Saban and with the great Tom Rinaldi of ESPN.
Hey, Tom and Coach, how are y'all?
Good, Pee Wee. How you doing?
Hi, Pee Wee.
I'm doing good, sir. You know, Coach, one of the things that you always talk about that happens to people or teams that affect them is complacency. I was just wondering, I don't know if you knew about it or not, but the 7A, Class 7A playoff game that was in Bryant-Denny between Thompson and Auburn, the way that game ended, I didn't know if you'd heard about it or not. But
Yeah, I did hear about it.
But
Thompson
do you use
behind by 9
stuff
points
like that for the players where they can
ago.
actually see that happen and then the results of it?
Yeah, will could you use that, as Pee Wee said, to show your players you see why you have to finish? Can you tie that into something that a message you might want to present?
Well, absolutely. There's no question about the fact that anytime you see a circumstance like that, when a team has the ball on the 20-yard line going in, and there's a minute, 19 or 20 seconds or whatever to go in the game, and they actually, I guess they kneeled on, I wasn't there, but I guess they kneeled on the ball 3 times in a row, and Thompson called 3 timeouts, and then blocked the punt to score and got an onside kick to score. So things can happen very quickly in a game, and I don't think you can take anything for granted. And I always think my philosophy has always been, if you have the ball, you have to try to win the game on offense if possible. In other words, if you need to get a first down in a situation like that so they don't get the ball back, then you should do everything you could do. And I'm not second guessing their coach because I don't even know all the circumstances surrounding this game, to try to win the game on offense and not have to play defense, because so many bad things can happen. And you've seen it in the NFL. You know, guys catch Hail Mary passes for touchdowns and turn a game around. And you get an onside kick and complete one pass, kick a field goal, and all of a sudden the game changes. So if you have the ball, none of those things can happen. And I think that when I first started becoming a head coach, which was at Toledo and Michigan State, we lost a few games because we didn't always try to win the game on offense. You know, it was one of those things where, okay, we're going to take as much of the clock as we can. We don't want to throw a pass. We might throw an interception, so we're going to give them the ball back. And when you do in college football and high school, the clock stops so many times in a 2-minute situation because of first downs and things like that, that it takes a long time for the clock to run out, and you can run a lot of plays. So my lesson that I would teach our guys, and there's always lessons. There was a lesson last week in the Auburn game. You know, we're supposed to go 2 minutes before the half, and most people think that when you go 2 minutes for the half, it's just like going 2 minutes at the end of the game, and it's not. It's a defensive 2 minute. You're trying to score. You're trying to steal the score, but you do not want to give the other team the ball back with field position or time so they can go for 2 minutes and 2 minutes and score. So what do? On 3rd down and 5, we chuck up a 9 route instead of trying to get a first down, and they get the ball back, and Auburn goes down and score. And had we not intercepted a pass on the 35-yard line, they would have got points on the board. But that was a mismanagement of the clock, in my opinion. You don't give them the ball back, even if you have to run it in a situation like that and make them use their timeouts. So there is a part of, you know, I think John Calipari in an article today that I read in USA Today, I think. He has a young basketball team, and he made the statement that players have to learn how to keep from losing before they can win. In other words, if you make bad plays and you're giving the other team more and more opportunities because of those turnovers that you make and mental errors that you make and things that you do wrong, you got to keep from doing that before you give yourself the best chance to win. And I think in all these situations, whether it was the high school game that you talked about, Auburn and Thompson, or our situation before the half last week against Auburn ourselves, they're all learning lessons for all players.
Tom Rinaldi, jump right in, my friend.
Nick, you know, to go back to last week, and obviously what till the false positive turned out to be a false positive. What did you miss most or what have you missed most in the last week?
Being around the players. You still coach the players. You're still on Zoom with them. You're still telling them as they watch the film what they did correctly, what they did incorrectly. But you're not really with them. You're not really around them. So there's the relationship that you have, good, bad, or indifferent, is sort of absent. You're not just your presence and not being around the players. That's probably the thing that I miss the most, because we're still able to game plan. We're still able to input things. We watch the same tape that we watched if we were in the office or not in the office. So I think that was the thing. And then when you did speak to the players on Zoom, even though you see them on Zoom in the team room or whatever, you don't really get somebody's reaction. And, as an interviewer, probably, when you're interviewing someone or you're talking to somebody, and I know I feel this way when I'm getting interviewed, the person on the other side really stimulates you in some ways by what they do. So a lot of times when I talk to the team, you really can't see the look in their eye when you're talking on Zoom. You see them, but you can't really see them like if you were there. So you don't know how they're reacting to what you're saying. So I think those two things probably are the two things that were most concerning, or something that I missed the most about being around. And then, you worry about how is your absence affecting everyone. All right, because the number one thing you don't want to happen is you or me to be responsible for people not being able to do things that they're capable of doing because of your absence. I mean, that was my greatest fear. So it turned out that it wasn't a problem, but it was a fear.
These are answers, Tom, that we have heard from the coach, things that, the team, not being part of a team, is something that has been a concern, if you will, that he has cited over the years. And I hear what you're saying, Coach. It's that's been a prevailing storyline. Not being part of a team is something that you've always cited over the years.
Well, that's absolutely true. And even though I still feel part of the team,
sure,
you're not next to them, so you don't feel their presence. You don't see their reaction, which I think is really, really important. It's like, when you look at somebody in the eye, when you talk to them, as opposed to having your head down. And, sometimes somebody has to say, I'd like for you to look at me when you're talking. That's almost the feeling that you get when you're not there with them. And, it's something that is important, I think, to being a leader and being a part of a team that I often, hold in really high esteem.
Yeah. Let's go to the phones. Jay is joining us from Fife, Alabama. Hello, Jay. Welcome to the Nick Saban Show.
Hey, thank you. Hey, Coach, Tom, what an honor to speak to you. Just kind of piggyback off Pee Wee's question. The high school football championships this week. We had a couple outstanding football games with, Fife being down 16 today, being able to come back and win. But my question is, since we moved it to Bryant-Denny and Auburn, how has that affected recruiting?
I can't say that I could put a value per se on whether it has or hasn't helped or hurt recruiting. I think it's great, though, that the young people in this state get the opportunity to play at the University of Alabama or Auburn, because they may not even go play college football. So for them to be able to have that experience with their team and their teammates, to play in Bryant-Denny Stadium or to play in Jordan-Hare Stadium, I think those are things that are well worthwhile. And I don't think there's any other place in the state, not to disrespect any other stadium or venue, but that would mean more to young football players who probably grew up aspiring to play in the SEC someplace. And some of them may not be good enough, but they all would get an opportunity to play in a stadium like that for a championship, I think would be a wonderful experience that they'll cherish for the rest of their life. So I think from that standpoint, it has tremendous value. I think that for any time people can come and see what we have so many great things at the University of Alabama. The university is beautiful. The stadium is beautiful. Our facilities are beautiful. So anytime we get people that can come and see that, especially in a year like this when you can't have people visiting, I think that is a real plus for us.
Here's a second down. Mack looks. Mack's in trouble. Mack stands in. Throws to Billingsley. Touchdown, Alabama. Touchdown, Alabama. 24 yards. Mack Jones to Jaleel Billingsley. Mack, the SEC co-offensive player of the week. He's winning that award seemingly every week. They might as well just retire it in his honor. And Coach Jaleel Billingsley, a tight end from Chicago, 6 catches this year. He's really come on nicely, hasn't he?
Well, Jaleel is a very talented guy. The big thing with Jaleel has been getting him to sort of play with the consistency and performance that you could put him out there and trust him to do what you expected him to do, what the quarterback expected him to do. And just in these last 2 or 3 weeks, he just kind of, came into his own, started doing things the right way, started practicing better, started showing some consistency and the work that he does every day. So this is, and there was a learning lesson right there. You don't stick the ball at the goal line. I can't help from coach him on that one, but anyway, he's done really, really good, really well. And I'm really pleased because we've lost some playmakers on offense. Losing Jaden Waddle, obviously, one. Having some of the receivers that haven't been 100%. Slade hasn't been 100%. Smitty's been a little banged up at times. So to get another guy that has playmaker type ability on offense is huge for us at this time of the season, and Jaleel has done a really good job of that.
Tom Rinaldi, I had a guy tell me the other day, he said, my gosh, that talent. He said, it's almost an embarrassment of riches. I said, no. I said, nobody's embarrassed one iota. It's because of that man and joining us on the screen and his recruiting ability. Go right ahead, Tom. Jump in.
Nick, a while ago, you told me off camera your view of the difference between a loss and a defeat. That a loss is something you don't learn from, right? A defeat is something that can help you to improve or grow. What then, Nick, is the defeat that has been most valuable to you? The game you lost that you learned the most from?
Good question.
Well, that is a good question. But as I sit here and think about it, think of the 2 national championship games that we lost. One, I felt we did a really poor job in preparation. We had like 7 coaches that were getting ready to leave or go someplace else or take head coaching jobs or worrying about getting coordinator jobs. And I'm okay with all that. I think it's my responsibility and my job to be able to keep people focused on those types of things so that we can put our players in the best position to have a chance to be successful. When we played really poorly in one of those games. The other game we lost on the last play of the game, which I felt like we should have called timeout. I should have called timeout. I was a little surprised that they weren't going to just kick a field goal and didn't respond and react quickly enough. So, but there is never a game that we lose. I can't hardly remember much at all about the 5 championships that we won, the one that we won at LSU. I can't hardly remember a lot about those games, but I remember so many details about the games that we lost and the lessons that we could learn. So not from just those games, but from every game, that we lose. And I'm constantly looking for lessons, even in games that we win. I constantly talk about you never want to waste a failing, because that's the best opportunity that anybody has to learn. It seems as though human nature says that when you have a failing and you are defeated, you're more willing to accept the critical eye and the things that you can learn from it, as opposed to when you win, people say, why are you upset about this? We won the game. We got the expected result, so why is there any critical eye for anything that happened in the game? But yet there's always opportunities, because no one really ever plays a perfect game, and there's lessons to learn. And people who are willing to respect the critical eye, and most people who are have goals and aspirations and want to really be good, and it's important to them, they're more willing to accept it than other people who get satisfied very easily because all they want to do is what they have to do to get by. And I think that's one of the things that's a key ingredient in having a championship team, is having people on your team that have those kinds of values in terms of how important it is for them to be the best at what they can do, because then they're always willing to try to learn and grow and respect what I call the critical eye, someone telling them what they did right and somebody telling them what they need to do to get it right or what they did wrong. And if you really want to be good, you're always willing to accept those things.
Let's go back to the phones. Carl is in Killian, Alabama. Hello, Carl. Welcome to the Nick Saban Show.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Glad you called.
Hey, Coach, I just want to know, are you going to be able to make the trip Saturday?
Yeah, I'll be there. I'll be there.
Nice.
I'm good. I think my time is up, so I'm ready to get back in the swing of things, even though I've been there for every possible thing. It's just been a little bit different, but now I can get back in person and do all the things we need to do without an issue or a problem.
Wonderful.
Medical staff makes all those decisions based on the CDC timetables and all that. So, but I'm clear tomorrow to travel with the team.
Coach, we have a question from your Nick Saban Show blog on AL.com. Jeff in Fairhope, Alabama, says, Coach, obviously there have been changes player-wise and coaching-wise on the staff at LSU. Have their general schemes changed a lot from last year's team? What's been the storyline there? How much are players, how much are coaching philosophy changes?
I think they're pretty significant on defense. Bo Pelini is the new defensive coordinator. They were a 3-4 sort of defensive team. Even when they were in nickel situations, they played a lot of quarters coverages and were very successful at that. Bo is a 4-3 kind of a guy, so it's a different configuration up front. And they still play a lot of man-to-man, and they still play a lot of quarters. So the coverage part of it hasn't changed dramatically, but the system is completely different on defense. Now, offensively, I think there are a lot of similarities to a lot of the things they did a year ago. Obviously, they had a very experienced team last year, an outstanding quarterback, really good players at every position on offense that had experience. And I think one of the things that they sort of had some growing pains, maybe doing some of the things that they did a year ago, but philosophically, I think it's very similar to what they've done in the past. And on special teams, it's very similar to what they've done in the past. So I'd say the biggest change is how they've been playing on defense, just scheme wise. Mm-hmm. But they have a lot of good players. They have a really good looking team. They've had some tough luck this year in some tough situations and tough circumstances, but this is a team that if they're capable of getting right against you, they cause a lot of problems, and that's something our players need to really have a lot of respect for.
Play clock at 3, 2. They get the snap away. Looking right side. Mechie behind the defense. Touchdown, Alabama! 24 yards. 24 yards. Mac Jones to Mechie, and that was a beautifully thrown. And indeed it was. Mechie, 6 catches, 55 yards. Couple of touchdowns against the Auburn Tigers as we welcome you back to the Nick Saban Show. final few moments with the coach and with our special media guest, Tom Rinaldi. Tom, why don't you jump in and let's get one more question from you before we say goodnight to the coach.
Nick, I just want to ask you about a player who I know you're really proud of. You really respect guys who are able to a degree, to wait. This player did not have to wait, but in a way, he was seen as the other guy for a while. Now he's the guy. I don't mean Mac. I mean Devonta. What presence does he have in serving this team with his experience and his sensational talent, Nick?
Well, I don't think there's ever been anyone that's more committed to doing things the right way in the program, setting a good example for other players, really a good leader, hard worker, works hard every day. And, leadership is all about taking the principles and values of the program and reinforcing them, on the street every day to all of your teammates. And he does it in such a palatable way that it never is upsetting to anybody or offensive to anybody, that he really engages. And he's just been such a pleasure to have on the team. There's very few players that just do everything correctly on the field, off the field, as a person, as a student, as a player. And it's great to see because we had 4 really good receivers. And he sort of was in the shadow of some of those guys to some degree, even though his performance was just as good last year as it is this year. But because this year he is the focal point, I think he's getting some of the attention that he deserves. And I think he made a business decision, come back to school, because he felt like he needed to get a little bigger, a little stronger, be a little more durable. That would really help his value as an NFL player and where he got drafted. And I think he certainly has done that. So he's made a good business decision. And, man, what an asset he's been to our program and to our team. And those are the kind of guys that you just love as a coach.
And a nice guy, too. Forget his ability, which we're not going to forget, but a nice man, too.
Absolutely. As fine a person as you're ever going to find.
Yeah.
Has a lot of compassion, has a lot of empathy for other people, is very kind, always has a smile on his face. We've had some really great personalities here, and Smitty's right up there at the top with all of them.
Amen to that. Well, Coach, we're pushing towards the top of the hour, so it's time for your final word this evening. It's presented each week by Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes-Benz, the best or nothing.
I kind of mentioned this earlier, that we have a road ahead of us, a journey ahead of us, that everybody that sits in that team room every day has an opportunity to impact with the choices and decisions that they make. So many football players this time of year start saying, I don't feel it. I'm tired, I'm wore out. We've had a lot of games, we've had a lot of practice. But the guys that choose because they have goals and aspirations of how they want to go down that road, I think is critical to having a successful road that you travel and a successful journey that you go on. And we've certainly created an opportunity for ourselves, and we got some tough games coming up on the road. It's always tough in the SEC when you play on the road, especially playing at LSU. They have a really, really talented team, so it's going to take a great effort on our part, but making the right choices to be able to control the things that we control, and don't let people make and have opportunities against us that we shouldn't allow them to have if we execute and do things the way we're supposed to, which is what we can control. So the big focus to me is make the choices and decisions to control who you are, know who you want to be as an individual and as a team. And then you got to go out there now and do it at a high level on a consistent basis, because you have put yourself in a position where you can accomplish something of significance if you can do that on a consistent basis. And it starts this week at LSU.
Indeed so. And Tom, I know you've got your hands full with some NFL assignments here coming up, but it's always a thrill when we see you walk into the stadium, and when you're able to join us here on the show. It's a pleasure. It really is.
Thanks so much for having me, Eli. And Coach, great to see you healthy and eager to have you back.
Well, Tom, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your friendship, and I hope you and your family had a great Thanksgiving and have a great holiday this Christmas. So thank you. I appreciate you doing this.
Gentlemen, thank
Thanks,
you,
Nick.
Coach. We'll see you tomorrow in Baton Rouge. That's Coach Nick Saban and Tom Rinaldi of ESPN.